This morning, defunding police in Austin. Council there voted unanimously to cut its law enforcement budget by a third. We'll go to the capital city for political reaction and where that money will now go. Shelley Luther, the Dallas salon owner who defied Governor Abbott, is now considering running for public office herself and already laying the groundwork to get there. Senator Kamala Harris is energizing Democrats as Biden's running mate, but how will she bring out new voters here in Texas? And Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo is with us on whether to raise property taxes by 8% there and her county's next steps to fight COVID.
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good morning to you. We're about to start two of the biggest weeks in politics this year. Let's start with that this morning as we get you caught up on political headlines across Texas. The Democratic National Convention begins tomorrow. In fact, we were supposed to be broadcasting this program from Milwaukee right now. But COVID forced the convention to go virtual Thursday. That is the big night, though. That's when Kamala Harris and Joe Biden formally accept their party's nomination. Republicans hold their virtual convention the following week. Texas lawmakers are going to introduce a bill called the George Floyd Act when the legislature reconvenes next year. The Texas Legislative Black Caucus revealed this a few days ago. The bill would make officers stop using force for minor offenses. It would require police to intervene if they see a fellow officer doing something wrong and prohibits chokeholds, among other things. And Shelley Luther is considering a run for public office. She is the Dallas salon owner who defied the governor's order and reopened her business during the shutdown. Luther posted on Facebook that she's thinking about running for the state Senate seat that Pat Fallon is vacating in North Texas. She's also been speaking at Republican meetings there. We're going to focus first this morning on the COVID pandemic. No matter where you are in the state, the number of new cases is trending down. But remember, we've been here before. Governor Abbott now says that the coronavirus hospitalizations and the number of positive cases, they must go down before he will allow bars to reopen in Texas. No place was hit harder with the virus than in Harris County. It has the largest population in the state. 4.5 million people live there, and it has had more than 87,000 cases of COVID so far. So with us from Houston this morning is the top elected official there. It is Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo. Judge, good morning to you.
Good morning.
The cases are trending down, and I noticed that your team just released a roadmap to reopen schools. Here's the question I have. Do you expect that we're going to see another surge in cases over Labor Day and whenever students return to class?
Absolutely. And even if we look at the present right now, we're seeing some promising indicators, but they're still quite concerning compared to what we had back in March and April when schools first shut down, and compared to the success stories that we've seen in other places around the country and in other places around the world. And this is what I don't want us to lose sight on. We can't give up early again. We have to make sure that before we proclaim victory and start reopening things, that hospitalization curve comes way down to 10, 20% of peak, that those cases come way down, because those cases will predict another hospitalization wave. Positivity rate, that comes down. We got to look at the confluence of factors. And right now things are looking a little bit better, but I can tell you, at least here, our cases are still very concerning, our deaths still very concerning, and the hospitalization rates, while lower, are still incredibly high, and to a point where opening schools in particular and any kind of gathering would be irresponsible.
Well, I want to talk about the county budget from here as well, too. Let's talk property taxes. Last year, you wanted to raise the county tax rate at up to 8%. Last week, though, I believe you suggested the county would need more funds to provide additional services, which you say are required. Are you going to try for another 8% hike again this year?
Not this year. It's, we knew that we had to have a strong rainy day fund, that we were underfunded in public health and healthcare in so many areas. And that's why last year we tried to do that in preparation for a time like this. Right now, people need us more than ever. It's not a time where we can raise taxes. Back in 2008, there was a huge number of layoffs, thousands of folks, a huge demand for county services, and we were trading at $80 a barrel in oil. These days, it's lower. We're having to decrease that supply, and we're seeing a worse economic crisis. And so it is very, very concerning. That's why we need that support from the federal government to help support our budget. And certainly for us, no way could we go to 8%, but we do have to make sure how we're going to be able to afford the additional services, the additional support that people are going to need, because that's what government needs to be there for. And look, that's why we put out this roadmap for schools. Is right now, there is no plan, right? The educators, the teachers, the parents, administrators are all wondering what to do. They're saying they're not physicians, they're not doctors. And so we need a realistic plan that is focused on science, that's not trying to balance the politics with the science, but is looking at just the science and how do we get our schools back sustainably. That doesn't mean, hey, I want it now. No, we have to do the work.
Right.
We haven't brought that curve down, so we got to do the work.
Yeah, and Judge, the recommendations, I believe, are at readyharris.org for people who are interested in that. I want to get back to the budget for a moment, though. With or without any help from the federal government, which we don't know if it's going to happen, do you expect layoffs inside Harris County?
I hope not, but if 2008 is any indication, the recession, then it's certainly a possibility, and it's something we're bracing for. We're bracing for very tough times next year. That hasn't kept us from helping people. Yeah. We have supported not just with federal funds, but we've actually used local funds, $30 million to support folks who don't qualify for federal aid with individual assistance, and of course making the most of all those federal funds, over $50 million for direct assistance, over $40 million for small businesses, $25 million for renters. We've now invested over $30 million for devices, for computers, and for hotspots for our schools. We're saying it's not safe to go back to school right now. It's in your hands to bring those curves down. In the meantime, the county's going to step up and make sure that the school districts don't have to front the money for these devices, and every child in Harris County who needs one has a computer and has internet.
Judge, we have about 30 seconds left here. I want to ask you about Joe Biden selecting Senator Kamala Harris as his running mate. Do you think that changes the race in Texas at all?
I think it's exciting. People come up to me all the time, or they used to anyway, before the pandemic. Young women, mothers saying we need these role models. And I think that is so important, so refreshing. Great person. And look, I don't like to wade into politics in the middle of a pandemic, but I think he'll be fantastic. She'll be wonderful. And it's change that we need for this response, for one.
Gotcha. Judge Lina Hidalgo from Harris County, thanks, and good to see you as always.
Thank you.
And now to Austin, where the city council made good on a threat to defund police. The council voted unanimously to cut the Austin Police Department's budget by 1/3. That's $150 million. Police there have faced months of criticism over the killing of an unarmed Black and Hispanic man, along with the use of force against protesters recently. Ross Ramsey is in Austin there for us. He's the co-founder and executive editor of the Texas Tribune. Good morning to you, Ross.
Good morning, Jason. How are you?
We're doing well. This is a huge cut in funding to police. What is the reaction there, and where's that money going to go eventually?
They're still sorting out the reaction. I think everybody was stunned at the size of it. The governor responded by saying this is irresponsible and state police will fill in until the legislature gets here and we can do something about it. A lot of the money in the Austin police budget isn't included in budgets in places like Dallas and Houston. They've got the park police in there and some other things. So some of this will sort out, but it's a huge cut by any measure.
Let's talk about the return to school for a lot of students tomorrow. Some kids have already returned to school, obviously, but some of the largest districts don't go back until September the 8th with virtual classes, and they're rushing. We've seen lines of these kids and these parents trying to get the Wi-Fi and the computers they need to even start. Is this going to work out?
It's problematic. I mean, the state is in the process of using federal and local funds to buy about $250 million worth of laptops and tablets and internet connections for the kids who don't have them. A survey by the education officials said 30% of kids don't have the right devices. 1 in 6 has no internet access. There are a lot of hurdles here.
Indeed so. Ross, thanks. Back to you in just a moment. Coming up, the Democratic National Convention kicks off tomorrow. Our next guest is Rebecca Acuna, the new Texas director for the Biden-Harris campaign, on her strategy in the final 3 months. And how threatened are Republicans with Kamala Harris on the ticket? That's one of our questions for the Travis County Republican Chairman, Matt Mackoveack. You're watching Inside Texas Prime. There's one Texas school district that is going on 2 weeks now of being back in the classroom. And the superintendent says he's learned some lessons through all of this. He shares the good and the bad with us on this week's episode of our Y'all-itics Political Podcast. We make it easy for you to listen to this podcast. Just grab your phone, turn on the camera, and point it here at the QR code on your screen. It will take you to the latest episode here. And remember, new episodes drop every Tuesday. Right now, we are, 2.5 months away from the November election. And in Texas, the Biden-Harris campaign has selected a new leader. It's Rebecca Acuna. She has her work cut out for her over the next 78 days until the election. Rebecca is with us this morning to look ahead at that. Rebecca, first of all, good to see you and congratulations on the position.
Hi, good to see you, Jason. Thank you.
Democrats clearly in Texas are encouraged about voting against President Trump, but you have to turn out tens of thousands of new voters on Election Day. Where in the world do you find them?
Look, this is part of a larger effort. In 2016, Texas came closer than Ohio and Iowa. In 2018, Beto O'Rourke came within a hair. This year, we're going to win. This is the Biden-Harris campaign. This is the largest presidential investment a campaign has made in Texas in modern history. We have a senior staff assembled of Texas natives who have worked campaigns and in government right here in Texas. On top of that, Texas is part of a $280 million effort across the country in earned media.
I want to ask you about cities, though. Obviously, the cities are Democratic. Harris County, Dallas County, Tarrant County, places like that. Tarrant County, not yet, even though Democrats there would definitely, think they're headed in that direction. Rural areas, those remain red, and we saw what happened in 2018 with the Beto and Cruz race. Is there any time to establish a meaningful foothold in those red rural counties?
Look, we're not taking any votes for granted. We are reaching out to voters all across the state. We have Mike Collier on as the senior advisor. And for context, Mike in his last election won in 172 counties where Beto O'Rourke did not. These were in many of the rural counties. What is happening is that because Texans finally believe that we can make a difference, that their votes matter, we're seeing volunteers from every single part of Texas. And these volunteers are reaching out to voters in every part of the state, including rural Texas. Just last weekend, our coordinated campaign effort with another partnership reached out to 2 million voters in a 2-day period. This is the kind of excitement that we're generating, and this is what we're betting on to reach voters all across the state, including in rural Texas, who have never been reached out to before.
And Rebecca, with that in mind, do you think that we might see campaign visits by Vice President Biden or Senator Harris over the next 78 days?
Well, first of all, there will be a lot of engagement and focus in Texas. They will be doing virtual events with Texas Events, but let's not forget that we're in the middle of a pandemic. And first and foremost, we're focusing on public health and public safety. There will be a record level of digital engagement and speaking to Texas voters from the Vice President and Senator Harris themselves.
All right. Well, Rebecca, clearly you guys have your work cut out for you. Best of luck to you. And we hope to see you again as we get closer to the election. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason.
Earlier in our program here, Ross Ramsey told us about Austin's decision to cut its police budget by 1/3. That unanimous decision by Austin City Council is welcome news by many there, but is leaving others speechless. Among them is Matt Mackowiak, the chairman of the Travis County Republican Party. He is in Austin for us. Good morning to you, Matt.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
First reaction to the City Council's decision.
It's outrage, honestly. I don't know that I can remember a more irresponsible decision being made by our city government in my lifetime. I've lived in Austin since 1984. If they want to argue that they're trying to reduce crime by addressing the symptoms or the causes of crime, that's one thing. We need to ask why the social programs haven't worked up to this point and why more money is the answer. But you don't reduce crime by cutting the police budget by 1/3. And this is going to make our city far more violent. We're going to see more homicides. We've already been, I think, had the fastest rate of increase in homicides of all of 15 major cities in the country in recent months.
Well, let me ask you about that. Why isn't it a good time to be politically disruptive and try to rethink things?
Well, again, I mean, if you want to have a smart, thoughtful conversation about reforming policing, and after the George Floyd's, outrageous killing, I think there can be some reason to debate that and to reform. But cutting the budget by 1/3 is not thoughtful reform. It's taking a meat axe to the budget at a time when our city is growing rapidly, where we have significant violent crimes happening every week and every weekend, and we've seen crime rising for the last several years. And when you combine that with the homeless camping ordinance, which is in place, this city's going to be almost dealing with anarchy in the coming months. And so I do think there is tremendous opposition at the local level, not just from Republicans, across the city. For business leaders, community leaders, absolutely outraged about this.
Well, Governor Abbott said that the legislature might take this issue up in January. What could state lawmakers do?
So you've seen them use preemption on a couple other issues like fracking bans and the Uber Lyft ban that was occurring in Austin and some other cities. You could see a preemption approach. You could perhaps see the state try to take the police power away from the city and have it be a state function, given that it's the state capital. Those are possibilities. We'll have to see what happens after the November election as the session begins in January.
And then about 30 seconds left here, Matt, I want to ask you about Kamala Harris. Republicans attacked her quickly after the announcement was made. That suggests to me that the GOP is threatened by her. Am I reading that wrong?
I wouldn't say threatened. I mean, if you look at her voting record the last 2 years, she's either had the single most liberal or second most liberal voting record in the Senate. I think she was more liberal than Bernie Sanders in both years. I don't think we want to see a California approach, certainly not to Texas and not to around the country. So I don't think the VP choice matters very much. It matters more given questions about Biden's capacity. But I think Harris in the end is not going to matter very much. This is Trump versus Biden. Who can rebuild the American economy after coronavirus? Who has the best vision for the next 4 years?
All right, Matt Mackoveack, good to see you again, man.
Thanks.
Take care. Speaking of Kamala Harris, will she change the election in Texas? That's one of my questions next for the Roundtable.
This is Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley.
Time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Ross is back with us, Bud Kennedy from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram is here, and of course Bernadine Steptoe, the political producer at WFAA in Dallas, joins us each week. Ross, to start with you, the presidential ballot is finally set. Kamala Harris is selected as the running mate for Joe Biden. Does this really change the race in Texas at all?
Sure. It fills it out. It lights up some parts of the Democratic electorate that, the Democrats were hoping to get excited about this race. It probably lights up some of the Republican electorate. I mean, it's another sign that this race is finally beginning, and the next 60 days are going to be very, very interesting. That's about how long it is until we start voting. Yeah,
Bud, that's a good point. It lights up both sides, but do you think it makes the race any tighter?
Well, it ignites it. It'll be tighter in Texas. I just keep thinking about 2008. In 2008, the Democrats nominated the most liberal member of the U.S. Senate. The Republicans said it wasn't a natural born citizen. Barack Obama served 2 terms as president. I don't think the Republicans want a replay of that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Bernadine. What has your mind been going back to with this historic announcement by Joe Biden?
I think that the Republicans are going to be very, very surprised, because one of the things that Senator Harris is going to do is turn out the vote. And turn out the vote among blacks, among women. And that is what is most important when you're looking at this election. Because look at, Bud mentioned 2008, where you had over 60% of the black vote that turned out in Texas. Okay, even in 2008, 2012, it was above 60%. But then when you went into 2016, Hillary, the black vote turnout was below 60%. And I think that Senator Harris is going to increase that vote. And with the increase of the vote, especially women, because she appeals to professionals, non-professionals. Her mother raised her. She was raised by a single mother. And I think the Republicans, for them to say that she won't make that much of a difference, I don't think they're being realistic.
Yeah, we'll check and see on that. I mean, that's the big question, is whether she really does increase the turnout. And like Ross said, possibly from both sides. I don't know if that was my phone or yours, Bernadine, but we'll let you put it on mute as we continue the roundtable here. Ross, let me ask you about the coronavirus and the pandemic itself, the new case trends. The case seems to be trending down, number of new cases trending down, but the positivity rate is sky high. It's above, 20% now, and Governor Abbott is vowing an investigation into the positivity rate. What's he going to find? What's he looking for?
Well, he pegged a lot of his decisions to this number early on in the coronavirus pandemic, and now the number seems to be screwed up. It seems to be more an indication of the number of tests, the quality of tests that are being done, than a real measure of where the disease is. And I think, first of all, he's going to try to figure out what exactly is going on with the coronavirus out there. What's the positivity rate really telling us?
And Bud, what if it stays this way and fluctuates back and forth until we get to November?
Jason, the governor's also dealing with a Republican Party that's hardening out there. And some of them are saying that the coronavirus is not such a big deal, or at least quit talking about it. Chairman West put out a statement saying that continuing to talk about the coronavirus and make a big deal out of it plays into the hands of the Democrats and the media. The Republicans are not happy with this. They kind of want to shush it up till November.
That's a good point, Bernadine. The GOP is hardening on the other side of where Abbott wants to be.
Well, that might be true, but the voters are not. The voters want the pandemic to be dealt with. They want their children safe. They want to be safe. And Texas is confused as to where it is in terms of handling the pandemic.
Yeah, indeed, Texas has been, it seems like we're back and forth, and now the big question is what happens come Labor Day, what happens when schools start returning kids to class. That's what we'll be watching as well. Guys, we appreciate it. Thanks so much. And thank you for watching as well. We'll see you back here on Inside Texas Politics again next Sunday. Take care.